This episode is brought to you by Nuclear Revenge, where an old fart gets his revenge. This story was from my grandpa, who knew this guy when he was growing up in the 1960s. So we'll call this guy Henry. He was old as shit when this story took place. In New Mexico in the early 1960s, Henry owned a decent-sized ranch. Now, Henry, he was pretty badass. In his younger days, he fought in World War I and was rumored to be a gunfighter in the last days of the Wild West. He was rumored to be associated with the Mafia in Chicago in the 1920s when he went to college. Now, Henry, he had about 15 ranch hands and 3 sons. He had lots of cattle and land. His youngest son was in the army at this point in time, and the other 2 had other jobs. A lot of his ranch hands were black, and some were refugees fleeing racial violence in the East at that time. So one evening, some of his guys were attacked and beaten up, and a couple of his cows were killed by some unknown attackers, but it was pretty obvious it was the KKK. So after assessing the situation, he really couldn't do much about it. And the police, well, they were useless. The police force was pretty much useless as it had like 2 guys. Now, these attacks continued for a couple of weeks. No one was beat up, but some cows were killed and fences and some stuff was destroyed. Henry received a note saying that he had to get rid of all his black workers by the end of the week, or they were gonna burn down his ranch and kill everyone and everything. So he kind of said, well, F this, and called his son, who just happened to be on leave. His son and a couple of his army buddies were on leave, and they pretty much had nothing else to do but come over. Henry, well, he was also really good friends with the biker gang in the area, who probably helped hide bodies on his land. So these biker guys came over, helped him prepare. No, he didn't want the police involved, as he was an old guy and he did things the old-fashioned way. So he sent a couple of his ranch hands over to town to get drunk and to distract the police. He would bail them out later in the morning. Basically, it was 2 underpaid cops trying to contain the drunken madness in a bar in a small town in the middle of the New Mexico desert. So one night, the clan pulled up ready to trash the place. The remaining ranch hands were having a bonfire and seemed completely oblivious to their impending doom. Henry, well, he had some forethought and had his son and his buddies and the bikers hidden in the barns and sheds, ready to attack. When the KKK showed up, they had their gasoline cans and some weapons, and there were only about 10 of them. Basically, it plays out that all the cowboys all acted drunk until the bikers and soldiers showed up and surrounded the KKK, and then they pulled their guns out. Now, I never heard if anyone was killed or if he just gave them a good scare, but there hasn't been a single racial incident or animal murdered in that town since. Now, Henry, he died a couple years later from cancer, probably because he smoked and dipped for like 60 years, because he was healthy back then. Anyways, Grandpa was cool, and he knew a lot of, well, guys like Henry.